Welcome to Answers in 2nd Esdras, produced by The God Culture. It's time to bring this home with more answers on the rapture from Scripture. We'll discuss the two groups that are recorded in heaven in Revelation, as well as 2nd Esdras. Why are they in heaven? And are they raptured? We'll see. Then, we'll answer several more questions with more Scripture. There's just so much, including the separation of the sheep and the goats, the wheat and the tares, Jacob's trouble, what is it, who is beheaded in the Great Tribulation, and we'll finish with a Dead Sea Scroll reference and a full wrap-up in the end. Let's fly into the remaining video on this topic, the rapture. Couple of things to cover. We covered the two multitudes that appear in heaven in John's vision in the last days. In basically last week's video on the 144,000, I believe that's part 14, and the innumerable multitude in the same video. But just quick, these are not raptured, nor even to be used as justification of such, though of course they try. Here's 2nd Esdras, chapter 2, starting in verse 38. But we cover much of Revelation as well in this. Go back and watch that video. Arise up and stand. Behold the number of those that be sealed in the feast of Yahuwah, which are departed from the shadow of the world. This is the 144,000, and you'll see there's more detail that says so. Were born in heaven, but conceived on earth. As Revelation says, they are redeemed from the earth. They are the man-child of Revelation 12. We cover that there. We're not doing that here. And have received glorious garments of Yahuwah, purified, made white or holy. No, that's not skin color. They ain't white people. In fact, these are children from the 12 tribes of Israel, thus not white, dark-skinned. Yes, we prove that. Watch. Also, you can even go back and watch what color is Adam, for that matter. Take your number, O Zion, and shut up those of yours that are clothed in white, which have fulfilled the law of Yahuwah. It's funny how we keep seeing, even in the New Testament, the believers in the end will still be keeping His commandments, His law, and His Sabbath, and His feast, if you are in a church teaching otherwise. Sorry, we're just bold here. It cannot be His ecclesia. Not on that. The number of your children whom you long for is fulfilled. Beseech the power of Yahuwah, that your people which have been called from the beginning may be hallowed. There it is again. He knew you from the beginning. Wow. Verse 42, I, Ezra, saw upon the Mount Zion a great people whom I could not number. Now, though John is given their number as 144,000, none of us can count that high either easily, so that's a lot. That's a big number. And they all praise Yahuwah with songs, exactly what the 144,000 do and where they do it. And in the midst of them there was a young man of a high stature, taller than all the rest. That is Messiah, and they are children. What they are not is the dead. These are alive, born in heaven, neither died, and they are children who sing. This cannot be used for the rapture. And upon every one of their heads he set crowns, and was more exalted, which I marveled at greatly. See, Ezra saw that even. So there is a multitude of 144,000 in heaven. Just bear in mind, they're there before the throne room, even prior to that scene, right there in the end, because they are a first fruits offering from the earth from Israel, the woman of Revelation 12, in the very end. Now, we cover that well, so go watch the video. Try to debate that in this video, and you'll be muted. Our channel, our rules. No one can use these, though, to try to prove a pre-trib rapture, which never exists in all of Scripture. The other multitude separated even in Revelation 7 as a different multitude, even under a different header appropriately in the KJV, is the multitude in heaven which cannot be numbered. Again, John saw two, and one of them is numbered. 144,000 is numbered. No, Ezra couldn't number them, but that's because he can't count that high that fast. Neither can you. These are not raptured either. They are the beheaded and martyred of the Great Tribulation. They don't go to sleep because Yahuwah has a different purpose for them, and this is a short time. They are not in heaven long, in fact, but watch that video for complete detail. Let's just look at one verse, and this is just one. There's more we cover in the other video. Revelation 7:13. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, Where are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. See, he knew that this guy knew. He was asking a rhetorical question he already knew the answer to. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation. There you go. First, meaning they were there during the Great Tribulation, not raptured, and still not raptured. These are believers that were dead. You'll see. They are in heaven and have washed their robes. Now, if your robe needs washing, you were killed. These are martyrs. And made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, are they before the throne of Elohim, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. Notice where his temple is. It's not on earth. It's in heaven. The true temple. Now, Israel had a temporary replica. Never needed again to be rebuilt. No third temple is ever in Scripture, other than it says one will be built for the beast to declare he is God. So that doesn't work for Yahuwah. Yahuwah doesn't need a physical temple on earth. He has the Garden of Eden, which houses his Holy of Holies on earth. But it's an enclosed garden. It's not a temple per se, though, again, very similar. Let's deal with a few more, and we won't get to everything, as this is so massively confused by the modern church generally. We probably could do a very long series on how many ways the church has screwed this up, because they have messed this up so poorly, not even reading a sentence. I mean, it's really, really bad, and you've seen a lot of that already, but these are probably going to be even worse in interpretations that you may have heard. You'll see. Let's go to Jeremiah 30. Again, we read from the KJV. Verse 7. What about the time of Jacob's trouble? That's what we're going to deal with here. That's used. Is that a pre-trib rapture? Well, even the word proves it's not, but we'll show you. Not for those who can read, that is. Alas, for that day is great. What day is that? Well, it's the day, the era of the Great Tribulation. So that none is like it. Again, those are the same words as Daniel and Messiah. Same time. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble. Uh-oh. This very characterization is proof positive Jacob, Israel, and the ecclesia will be in trouble or tribulation. The Great Tribulation. They will go through it. But they'll be saved. What does it say? But he shall be saved out of it. Oh, you mean taken out in a rapture? How is he saved out of it? By going through it. And then the rapture occurs not until the day of judgment. How do we know this? Well, Jeremiah says so. I mean, let's see. Again, they'll read a verse like this, and then they'll take it out of context. And they won't bother to even read a couple of verses later. Skip to verse 10, a few verses later. But we encourage you, read it all. This is a YouTube video. We can't cover, this is already a long video. Come on. Therefore, fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith Yahuwah. Always, how he prefaces the very end. Notice that. Don't fear. Neither be dismayed, O Israel. This is specific to Israel, but do not forget we are grafted into Israel as the ecclesia, but this is specific. Yes, differentiated in Scripture, even in actually multiple Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament, but nevertheless, he has one body. He doesn't have two bodies. And those that separate that, it's really only separated for prophecy, so that we'll understand Israel actually has an expressed purpose in the end. There are specific prophecies to that people still, because of the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I mean, it goes all the way back. And he's still honoring that covenant as they return to him, and he forgives them, and he takes them back, even though he divorced them. Yes, Yahuwah divorces. But he'll take them back. For lo, I will save thee from afar. Same language as Isaiah's promise in chapter 60, verse 9. The ships of Tarshish will bring back the lost tribes of Israel, and that is the Philippines. And that's why we believe it so prevalent in the last days, so significant, because it's right there in prophecy many times over. Once you restore that geography and understand it, which is what that book and series is all about. And thy seed from the land of their captivity, and Jacob shall return. That's the lost tribes of Israel. They return. I know some say, oh, there's no lost tribes. Come on, that's crap. They are still lost to this day. Yes, we can identify where they are. No, you cannot identify which are which within those peoples. You can't. We have looked into that, and we chose not to even take it that far because it cannot be done with accuracy. You can't do it and know for sure. But again, we can all be grafted in. So, in Ezekiel 39, this is after the final battle. In fact, this is the same timeline. So, Scripture ties with Scripture here. And shall be in rest, and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. Well, guys, that's only one time. That means the wicked are gone. The evil is disappeared. That's the only time that could be, after the day of judgment. Indeed, for he will save us for 1,000-year Sabbath rest, in fact. For I am with thee, saith Yahuwah, to save thee. Yes, he saves us. But that's not about a pre-trib rapture. It doesn't say that. In fact, it says the opposite. So he saves them, but when? Check this out. He says, though I make a full end of all nations, whither I have scattered thee. So they're still scattered in the nations at that point. Oops. When does he make a full end of the nations? On the day of judgment. A full end, read it, full end. That means their spirits. Not just a battle. This is extinguishing their spirits. They're gone. Full end on the day of judgment. This is dated. We know when this happens right here in the same verse, but they're not reading it. It cannot be used to propagate a pre-trib rapture. That is illiterate. By the way, why will Jacob have to suffer and endure this trouble or tribulation? Well, what do you think? You're perfect? Of course not. Romans 3:23 says, none of us are. All have fallen short of his glory. For this reason, we will have to endure this time. That's the way it works. Now, keep reading, and this will be even clearer. Yet will I not make a full end of thee. Now, some will survive physically through the Great Tribulation. That's pretty much what he's saying. But I will correct thee in measure, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished. Okay, so he will save us, but will not leave us unpunished. Wow. Now, as a father, that rings as a righteous judgment. No, we don't want our children to suffer punishment, of course, but we will allow it to teach them, won't we? If we don't, well, then we don't love them, right? That's what the word even says. Spare the rod, spoil the child, right? Just as Ezra defines two peoples in the end, and as we saw, one taken from the field and the other left, right? The one person standing in the field, one taken. Matthew 25 really explains this well. Let's go to verse 31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, so the angels are there too, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before the judgment throne, and before him shall be gathered all nations. And he shall separate them one from another. There you go. So he's going to separate the righteous from the unrighteous, which really is a measure of judgment. I mean, how does he know which is which? Well, he judges them, right? He knows. Meaning they are together, though, prior. How does he separate those who are righteous? Again, not perfect, but righteous nevertheless, in relationship with him. He raptures them then on the day of judgment, so they are not burned in the fire which replenishes the earth and consumes all within. They also can't be in heaven because it too is replenished at that same time. That's why they're in the air in between. See? That's how it works. As a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats, the saved from the unsaved, if you will. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, just as he sits on the right hand of the Father. There are no coincidences in Scripture, really. They are consistencies. That's what this is. But the goats on the left. We want to be sheep, not goats. Now, one last scripture, and then to the Qumran scrolls quickly, and we'll wrap up. Again, there is so much. This could be a whole very long series because, again, the modern church has really royally screwed this up. They're just not reading, and they are not scholars. Not of the Bible, only of their doctrine. How exactly can the modern church mess this up so bad in confusion? In fact, it's a question. Let's go to Revelation 20, verse 4. A simple reading tells us exactly in each case, doesn't it? I mean, we've seen this time and time again. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. That's the day of judgment, right? That's where we are in time here. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahusha. You get that? Those are tribulation martyrs. I mean, that's what Revelation says earlier, that they'll be beheaded in the tribulation because they don't take the mark of the beast. And yes, some of us believers will lose our heads. So what? I mean, we make a big deal out of that. Oh, I don't want to lose my head. It's fleeting. It's temporary. It's nothing in the scheme of things. And for the word of Yahuwah, and which had not worshipped the beast. Oops. When does that happen? You can't have them deciding to worship the beast who was not even yet, could you? He doesn't even rise out of the sea until the midpoint of the tribulation, the beginning of the great tribulation. That's it. It can't work otherwise. Therefore, they weren't raptured yet, see? So there's no pre-trib, no mid-trib rapture in Scripture, period. And he continues, neither his image, so they didn't worship his image. That is not even formed to worship until the second beast rises out of the sea after the first. We have seen this. We covered it in the two beasts earlier in this series. Again, only the Great Tribulation fits that time as well. Neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, meaning they had to have gone through the Great Tribulation, and we know the beast is given the power to kill them. He is. And they are those martyrs. That's who they are. This becomes the innumerable multitude. These do go to heaven. Men don't generally right now today, but these do. But only for a very brief time for a specific purpose. And they lived and reigned with Messiah 1,000 years. Now it's a small price to pay, losing your head to live with him for 1,000 years. And then they continue even after that, saints loosed. Then, after 1,000 years, and he fails. And then he will be gone, and they will be with Yahusha forever. How about the separation of the wheat and the tares? Does this change the order? We had a comment along this regard, and we already had that in here, but we wanted to point that out. Sincere comment. Question, really. Not at all. This actually serves to confirm exactly what we've been saying all along. Let's read Matthew 13, starting in verse 27. So the servants, they are angels. That's what Messiah says. He defines this later in starting in verse 36. So read forward as well when you're done with this. Take a look. You'll see for yourself. He tells you these are the angels. This is the end times, and he has an army of angels with him at this point of the householder, that is Messiah. Again, he says so. Came and said unto him, Sir, dost not thou sow good seed? Now that's the righteous, known as the wheat later, in thy field? On all of earth is what his field is. From whence then hath it tares? Those are weeds, unrighteous, growing within, as we all well know. He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. Now that's Satan, and he says so, so we know that's firm. Tainted the unrighteous, and they grew as weeds. What do weeds do? Think about it. They strangle the wheat, or whatever they're growing in, or the righteous, basically. They take its nutrients, and they block out the sun in time. This is why the unrighteous have to go. If you've ever gardened, you don't leave the weeds. They have to go. They will strangle your plants. Ever feel that way? It's because it's true, folks. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? In other words, the tares of the weeds. Do we root them out? All the weeds, the tares, the unrighteous, do we just take them out from the wheat or the righteous and just leave the righteous? Is that how we should do this? Notice, this is a story of separation in preparation for judgment. It's not judgment yet. It is not the account of judgment itself until later. Messiah then burns them. And again, verse 36 on, he actually explains that as well. But in this portion, he's not burning them yet. That's not happening. They're just being prepared, you will see. If you fast forward to verse 36, Messiah explains these interpretations. They're his, not ours. Check it out. Continued, but he said, Nay, no, don't pull the weeds that way. Do it this way. That's what he's going to do. Lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Ever gardened? You have to be careful when pulling weeds, not to damage your plants, right? The challenge here, though, is the world is mostly weeds, unrighteous, unfortunately. So you are guaranteed to pull up a lot of wheat or righteousness if you do it that way. So he says, don't do it that way. Let both grow together until the harvest. This is why we have to wait, folks. This is why this has to come to an end, and this all happens at once. This is why. Many wonder. Wheat and the tares, the harvest of both, okay? And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, now those are the angels, not Messiah. The reapers are the angels. He says so, not us. Gather ye together first the tares. Gather the angels, the angels don't burn them. Messiah does, remember that. They prepare them in bundles, basically, get them ready to be burned. That's the way that it works. And really, if you read John 15, this actually coalesces perfectly with Messiah's definition of salvation, which does include this judgment day. And bind them in bundles to burn them. See, they are not burned yet, just prepared. They are readied for Messiah to burn later. Only he burns them, not the angels. When it says first, it means gather them first, not burn them first. So this does not change the order. But gather the wheat into my barn. Where's that? It's in the clouds. If it was on earth and not separated, then the righteous would be burned with the unrighteous, and that wouldn't work. You can't have that. This is why we are taken into the air between heaven and earth, which are both being replenished, both burned with eternal fire, along with all the unrighteous. That's the place where he is, and that's the place that's not getting burnt. This does not say the unrighteous are burned first. It says they are separated and bound, ready to be burned, sitting in bundles, awaiting their execution. See, the rapture happens just before they are burned. And this happens quickly. This is merely the separation and preparation in these verses. Again, later in the passage, Messiah does say he burns them. Yes, he does. We know that, and we follow that through in everything we've covered so far. It is very consistent. Did the temple priests understand this day of judgment to come? Indeed, they did before Revelation. Perhaps not the rapture itself, but the timeline firmly, because they had second Esdras, for one. We could spend an entire video or more on this, but here is a passage. We're just going to pull out one from their writings in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there are so many more, even an entire scroll titled the War Scroll, identifying the battle with especially Gog of Magog, who, by the way, already attacked Israel today. We've covered that in this series. No, this is not Gog and Magog, who joins Satan in the end when he's loosed after 1,000 years. That's 1,000 years later. That's, a short time. Many confuse that, but you can't. We are keeping that separate for good reason. It happens 1,000 years later, for one, not immediately after the tribulation, which is what we're covering here when these things happen. And that's where we are. They even identify his allies, and they are the same as the supposed mass aliyah, the migration of 1948 to 1952 into modern Israel. We've covered that in this series. Watch the Great Head. A 100% match. We already covered that. And no, modern Israel are not Hebrews. Jews are not Hebrews. The word is fraud, and the concept is fraud. We cover that. In fact, watch the origin of the word Jew. This is from the blessing of the prince of the congregation, who even in this clip can only fit Messiah. This is Yahusha. But every time it is used, and that is often in these writings, it's always Messiah. Check out this prophecy, though. This is incredible. The Master. Now, that is John the Baptist. We prove this out more in our original canon series. Yes, he lived in Qumran, Bethabara, and baptized Messiah there in fresh water, not the nasty, muddy Jordan River. That's fraud. And shall renew for him the covenant of the community, that he may establish the kingdom of his people forever. What's that? That's the law of Moses. It's the covenant, the same one. They renew covenant every year on Shavuot. That's the practice of Moses. It's the practice of Noah. It's the practice of Adam. It goes all the way back, folks. This is the same covenant. It's renewed. It's made new, but it is the same covenant. Again, only Messiah. And what is his covenant? The same as Moses, which Messiah continued in renewal, that he may judge the poor with righteousness. Now, only Messiah, and on the day of judgment, can do so, and dispense justice with equity to the oppressed of the land, and that he may walk perfectly before him in all the ways of truth. Only Yahusha did so. And that he may establish his holy covenant at the time of the affliction of those who seek Elohim. See, Yahusha has a covenant, yes. A new covenant, yes. Yet he's renewing the covenant of the community, which is the same covenant of Moses, the same as Noah, and so on and so forth. The covenant has been the same. It doesn't change. Maybe a letter here or there, but generally it doesn't change. His 10 commandments remain. The church has no problem with 9 of them. They don't think that we should go out and kill, steal, and all the other things, commit adultery, etc. No, they don't think that. They're following 9 of the 10 commandments. The only one is the Sabbath that they have a problem with, which automatically tells you that they're wrong. I mean, they're hypocrites if they keep 9 out of the 10 and throw the other one out. That makes no sense whatsoever. That's not a new covenant. That's nonsense. May Yahuwah rise or raise you up to everlasting heights, and as a fortified tower upon a high wall. May you smite the peoples with the might of your hand, and ravage the earth with your scepter. Oh, wow, that's prophetic, and that is very firmly only Messiah, only Yahusha fits that. And again, this is the day of judgment, understood before Messiah was born in the flesh. May you bring death to the ungodly with the breath of your lips. Oh, do you know what that is? That's an exact quote from the book of 2nd Esdras. Revelation hasn't occurred yet. John isn't even born yet. So he couldn't have written that book. Messiah isn't even born yet at this point. But this is used in the Dead Sea Scrolls in interpretation. We're going to cover that soon as well. May he shed upon you the spirit of counsel and everlasting might, the spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Elohim. May righteousness be the girdle of your loins, and may your reins be girdled with faithfulness. May he make your horns of iron and your hooves of bronze. May you toss like a young bull and trample the peoples like the mire of the streets, the unrighteous peoples. This is talking about the day of judgment. And really, folks, you're reading 2nd Esdras in the Dead Sea Scrolls, right there in interpretation. It's being used, and that's firm. But again, we'll prove that in another video. For Elohim has established you as the scepter. That's Yahusha. The rulers and all the kings of the nations shall serve you. Only Yahusha fits that. Psalm 72, David prophesied this very same as well. And no, he's not talking about Solomon, because Solomon cannot redeem people. And he says that son can. He's talking about Yahusha. He shall strengthen you with his holy name, and you shall be as a lion. Ooh. That's 2nd Esdras. And you shall not lie down until you have devoured the prey which naught shall deliver. None shall deliver. That is specific language from 2nd Esdras again. And this is the day of judgment. So yes, the temple priests before Messiah certainly understood this topic. Why don't we? Let's recap. And just this alone, there is no case for a pre- or mid-trib rapture, period. And this is settled by Scripture, not us. Those not reading it and ignoring all of this are defined by Peter as operating in willing ignorance in these last days. Or in other words, most of the modern church, unfortunately. Let's recap from the first video. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. When does the rapture happen? After the beast is revealed. That's not pre-trib. That's not mid-trib. There's no rapture prior to the beast being revealed. Doesn't work. At the last trump and not before. After the Great Tribulation. After the tribulation of those days. Same thing. Great Tribulation. After the sun and moon are darkened. After the stars fall. Look out. Did that just happen? Uh-oh. So, no, don't look for the rapture then. It will not happen yet. After all the signs, and there are many of Matthew 24, really. After the dead rise in Messiah. After, or really same day, the heaven and earth are made new. A lot of these are the same day, the day of judgment. after the patience of the saints during and through the tribulation. Even from comments, the only challenge to that first video was one of, well, I don't want to believe it. Okay, so don't, that's up to you, but not a single true challenge, nor can there be. You will not prove this wrong, because this is Scripture, and it's its stance, not ours. How on earth can anyone overcome all of this? And, oh, wait, we're only halfway. Let's keep going. Much from 2nd Esdras especially, the hidden book of prophecy, which series you are in. After their number is fulfilled in their appointed time, already known by Yahuwah and already, given to us pretty much. After the dead are raised on that same day. After a great number are killed. That happens during the Great Tribulation, and it is after that period. After the bride appears, that's the day of judgment. After the Great Tribulation, how many times do we have to see that? After 7 days, 7,000 years in Anno Mundi, since the time of creation. Yes, that dates the earth as well, and yes, the Bible does firmly, and it's accurate. Watch parts 9 through 11 in this series, as well as Yah's calendar in Answers in Jubilees. On the Day of Judgment. After Jacob's trouble or tribulation. Yeah, Jacob wouldn't be troubled if he was taken or raptured before the trouble. Now would he? The very term tells it all, and this further says, but running out of room after the lost tribes return, even. At the time of the full end of the nations, notice the full end, not war, their final consummation with eternal fire, the day of judgment. In 2 parables at least, when he separates his sheep or wheat, his righteous, from the goats or tares, the unrighteous. And finally, after the mark of the beast, yet again, worshiping his image, which is the Great Tribulation period, thus, once again, after the Great Tribulation. How many times do we have to see this well-defined, characterized, and perfectly matching in Scripture with no conflicts whatsoever before we realize we are being lied to? No, your pastor's not trying to lie to you. It's the seminaries who are dispelling this nonsense. Now, what pastors should be doing is proving all things for themselves before preaching to you. And unfortunately, they're taught not to dare question what seminaries have already determined as doctrine. You know what? It's time for us all to question everything. Because the Bible will pass every such test. Truth will pass every such test. But man's doctrine will not, and definitely doesn't in this instance for sure. So many have asked for this, and we set out to test the timing of the rapture. Is there a rapture? Yes, there most certainly is, whether the word is used specifically or not. Some try to play on things like that. Stop the nonsense. There is a rapture as we meet him in the air, and that requires us being taken up. But where are we taken? We're taken to the clouds between heaven and earth. Thus, we're not consumed when heaven and earth are remade with eternal fire. Pretty common sense there. Believers meet Yahushua in the air after the Great Tribulation. I mean, after the Great Tribulation. Did I say after the Great Tribulation? We did see that this is after the Great tribulation, right? I mean, so of course we are just guessing. We're just speculating here. Uh, when we read time after time after time after time that this occurs after the Great Tribulation, so many times and so many different ways. From Messiah, Paul, Daniel, Jeremiah, Ezra, even the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, we can kind of say, no, we can firmly conclude as this proves it. Done. The rapture is real and occurs after the Great Tribulation and on the Day of Judgment. Some dunderheads in the church decided a while ago that it would be better to lie to you. It's the same reason some parents think that Santa Claus is a good idea. Let's lie to our children and teach them that some big fat guy with a beard from the North Pole comes and gives them gifts. Of course, when you find out who he really is, you probably will quit that because you literally are propagating an occult message there. And yes, it is harmful to your children. So is the whole holiday for that matter, and we have talked about that at length. So we wouldn't be worried about what Messiah says multiple times. Not to worry about, right? But nevertheless, they decided for us, that's what they did, that they would change the Bible, even caught in translation of the word prevent, which is precede, as the rapture does not precede the dead rising. Amazing. We covered that last video. They thought it better to propagate such a lie than to face the truth. This is a wussy church, having a form of godliness, yet denying the power thereof, just as prophesied. See, our power, folks, is we can have relationship with Yahusha and know his word and be bold. We don't need them to understand, and they prove they willingly are ignorant on such topics, making themselves utter fools. And there are many such we've already covered at this point in our 350 now videos. No wonder they chose to render in fraud the Greek word ecclesia as church, which is Old English and originates in the word cirque or circus. This is a circus indeed. No animals needed, but we are watching a puppet show, an entertainment paradigm, not a biblical one, which is why Hollywood also loves to make Christian movies now. None of them, and I mean none, are Bible. Which defines his ecclesia as two or more, as wherever we are gathered in his name, there he is in our midst. All this focus on worthless buildings and infrastructure and structures of other sort and symbols of pagan origin, such as the steeple, which is an Egyptian obelisk, which is a male part of Osiris. That's disgusting and sitting on churches. All the refusal to continue the Bible practice of the Sabbath, the commandments, and the feasts, and utter ignorance. Yes, this is rebuke, folks. And yes, this is offensive, not defensive. What we are viewing today is not his ecclesia. It is a circus. You may have been even trained, as I and all of us here, to be a ringleader in this circus. The good news is you can begin to lead people back to the restoration of Scripture, as it is written. We all can. We are done placating ignorance. There is no time for that. Forget political correctness and fickle sensitivities of the weak. Who cares? What are the classifications in the end? The wheat and the tares, or weeds. That's it. You're either wheat or you are tares. Which are we? Notice, no lukewarm. That category disappeared by the end. And much of the church is. But what did he say of them? He classifies that he will spew you out of his mouth, meaning They are tares or weeds by categorization. According to him, they are not wheat, saved, righteous. They are goats, not sheep. What do sheep do? Follow their master. The denominational church generally looks nothing like him and does not know him generally. Sure, it's a gathering, but so is a circus. It is time to restore his ways, his Sabbath, his feasts, his commandments, his word. No, you don't have to, but if you wish to be classified as a sheep and wheat, you do. If you love him, you will. Most watching do, and many of us have been misled by a dark age church, continued in practice, whose foundation remains the Catholic Church, whose true foundation is the occult, Mithraism, and Babylonian mystery religion, not the Bible, not even remotely the Bible. We must come out of her, my people. And he's talking even to the church when he says that. Many are awakening now, but keep your expectations in check because those are few. And that is the way of this age. We have only found one nation in prophecy where this is truly going to be a revival and rising occurring as a nation, and that is the Philippines. And that's just fact. Ophir, Sheba, Tarshish in prophecy many times. Havilah, the land of Eve. You will see this in the coming days, but as we cover, we have about a century left, folks. Watch parts 9 through 11 of this series. It is time to get serious and live for him and no longer ourselves, and certainly not for an organization or a church. We hope you have all learned at least something or confirmed, as I know many of our viewers already know, the rapture doctrine of the church is false. This ends debate, my friends. It's over. We have over 300 videos on this channel, many just as profound, with some 50 or so in Tagalog for Filipinos, and coming soon, Spanish. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell for notifications of new uploads. Join our email list, as YouTube fails to notify often and they just forget. They can't blame them. They just forget. They forgot. And we will notify you ourselves at thegodculture.com. Just fill in the pop-up there. And friend us on Facebook at The God Culture, _space original. We now have 5 books published internationally, being read in over 80 countries. With our new release now available, Rest, the 400-plus page case for the Sabbath. Just go to ophirinstitute.com for all the links for your area for all of our books, or you could specifically go to bookofjubilees.org, restsabbath.org, or to esdras.org for those books, which have their own sites. Thank you for watching. Now, always remember, prove all things for yourself. Yah bless to everyone. In 400 BC, the prophet Ezra predicted, "For my son Yahushua shall be revealed with those that be with him, and they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years." Essentially, 0 BC, the era Messiah was born, and by his very name, in exactness. "After these years shall my son Messiah die, and all men that have life." The origin of John 3:16. "And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, and the signs shall happen which I showed you before. And then shall my Son be declared, whom you saw as a man ascending." Even the end times are defined long before the book of Revelation. The Son of Elohim being confessed in the world. After 7 days, the world will be raised up. Mass resurrection of those who are asleep. The judgment seat. Evil will disappear. The Lion of Yehudah will consume the final empire, consuming his enemies with fire from his mouth. The lost tribes return. Every eye shall see him, handing out crowns and giving palms. The road to salvation is a narrow gate. Few are saved. The Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life are opened in the end. He is not willing that any should perish. The signs of the end times and origin of Matthew 24 in part. These are just some of the many prophecies in the book of 2nd Esdras, long before the book of Revelation was conceived. 2nd Esdras, written before John's revelation. This is the interpretation of the dream which you saw, and whereby you only are here lightened. For you have forsaken your own way, and applied your diligence unto my law, and sought it. That's Yahuwah speaking to the prophet Ezra. 2nd Esdras is dated at least 1st century BC, as it is used to interpret Habakkuk and blessing of the prince of the congregation, who is Messiah. This includes a radiocarbon dating testing as well of one fragment from 120-5 BC. We cover this in the introduction. This book includes 1st Esdras as well, which is also dated to the 1st century BC, when one examines what is called in fraud the Proto-Esther fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which do not remotely fit Esther, but are a match to 1st Esdras. We cover this in the introduction of this book, as well as on our YouTube videos on Esther in the original canon series. 2nd Esdras was quoted by Messiah according to the original authorized 1611 King James Version. Matthew 23:37 and 38 is a direct quote from 2nd Esdras, which is anchored right there in the margin note as the origin of Messiah's words. For Esdras is 2nd Esdras, which we explain in the introduction. Yes, he quoted 2nd Esdras multiple times. When accurately dated, 2nd Esdras proves the origin of significant doctrine in the New Testament. We cover many such instances in the introduction. There is a reason why these two books remain in some Bible canons to this day. They test as inspired Scripture. Test them for yourself. Get your copy now, free in ebook. Again, this content is free. If you would like it in print, it is available on Amazon internationally and Shopee Philippines. Just go to esdras.org. Download the ebook and the links are there for your area.